Good afternoon, thank you for joining us today. My name is Hannah Booth and I'm the Communications Manager here at Moorepay. It's my pleasure to introduce the topic to you for this session, which is the engaged employer and winning the war for talent. As a payroll and HR provider, we have conversations with leaders of SMEs all over the country on a daily basis. Overwhelmingly, the issue that concerns SMEs is how and where to recruit the skilled staff that they need and also how to keep them. We recently conducted a piece of research to see whether the benefits companies offer have an impact on how valued employees feel. We sought the opinions of over 2,000 employees and over 350 employers to understand whether companies are giving their people the benefits they want. In today's webinar, I'm joined by my colleagues Stuart, Carl and Christina, and we're going to discuss the findings and implications of the research. So, before we begin, I do have a couple of housekeeping points to run through. The mics are muted for the webinar, but that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions. There's a questions box where you can start to drop your questions in, and at the end of the presentation, we'll run through all of your questions. I'll also let you know at this point that we will send you a copy of the slides and also a recording of the webinar, so you don't need to worry about taking lots of notes. In terms of the structure of the webinar, I'll begin by providing you with an overview of Moorepay for those of you that aren't aware of the organisation. Then I'll introduce our host and panellists, and after the main body of the session, we'll come to the Q&A period. So, for those of you that aren't aware of what Moorepay do, we're a payroll and HR solutions business. We were established over 50 years ago and have 10,000 customers across a range of industries. On a monthly basis, we produce approximately 500,000 pay slips and we handle around 12,500 payroll and HR queries. Essentially, we're the market leader in HR and payroll services to small businesses. Our promise is to make payroll and HR easy, and we do that via simple onboarding, easy to use software, rich functionality, and flexible services. This wheel summarises the products and services we offer, and if you'd like to find out more about us, you can go to moorepay.co.uk, where there's lots of information on our services and solutions. Moving on, I'm now going to tell you a little bit about today's panel. Carl Hardcastle is an employment law consultant at Moorepay and works on our HR advice line, giving expert advice on every aspect of complex legislation that businesses face. Carl is legally and HR qualified and has over 20 years experience. He's worked at Moorepay for over 9 years, specialising in redundancy, disciplinary and wider contentious employee relations issues. We're also joined by Christina Holloway, our Director of Service Excellence. Christina has managed payroll teams and departments in both the UK and India. She's worked at Moorepay for a number of years and also has experience as an in-house payroll manager. My colleague Stuart Clough, Senior Communications Manager at Moorepay, is going to host our panel discussion and will take you through the key findings of the research. I'll now hand you over to Stuart, who will take you through the agenda for this webinar.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Hannah, for bringing us into this, and thank you to Christina and Carl. Hello, good afternoon. Who are joining us today. I'm pretty excited about this webinar for a couple of things. One is that I think we've got some really interesting, powerful things to share today, but also I'm pretty excited because this is kind of a new format for us, having a panel show. So hopefully it's going to add some additional value as we go through and mix up the format. But we're trialing it anyway, and we'll see. And hopefully, hopefully it adds something to proceedings. So what are we talking about on this webinar? So first of all, I just want to recap why we've done this research, why we've looked at the questions we have, and why it matters at the moment. So just a little bit to frame the wider context of these questions. Then we're going to look at the key findings from the research, and we got four phrases there that don't mean a lot now, but hopefully will by the end, and that should sort of frame a little bit of the top level messages that you're going to want to come away from with that. And then, as Hannah alluded to, we're going to go for a Q&A and hopefully get some really good questions answered, and maybe some specific industry or case by case questions, whatever you've got that you'd want to ask around any of the topics that come up. As I say, we've got payroll and HR specialists on this webinar, which is also, I think, Carl, the first of its kind.
I think so, indeed. I'm excited to be here. So, good.
Yeah, so great. So we've got a lot of experience on the line, and right. So without further ado, let's have a look. So first of all, why this research? So back in July, we ran a webinar on employee wellbeing, and we're really acutely aware that employee wellbeing is fast becoming one of the biggest topics around the HR and payroll space. There's a lot of it's features almost daily in the press, if not probably daily, to be honest by now. It's a huge cause, and everyone is touched by it in civil society, in business, personally and professionally. You can just see a few of the stats behind employee wellbeing. Now, I'll come on to a little bit more in a moment about what constitutes employee wellbeing, but the two things that sort of really drove us: one, we started looking at mental health and what you can do about mental health and wellbeing, and the other thing we were really interested in is financial wellbeing. But I say we'll come to both of those. So just there's a few stats you can see there around the cost to businesses, and a £42 billion annual cost to employers from poor mental health is obviously an awful thing. But I think the human side of that, the 300,000 people who lose their jobs each year due to mental health. I'm not sure if it's called a crisis in the modern parlance today.
It's something we see a lot of on the advice line. Yes, indeed. Everybody's under pressure from their clients, from their customers, reduced prices, faster output, etc., etc. At some point, something's got to give.
Something's got to give, and a lot of things are giving. And I think so. Mental health is one of the things that was really interesting us. And then secondly, if I want to move on the slide, and then the other side to it, I think for us was the financial health, financial wellbeing aspect to all this. And this is something we've been picking up more and more over the last few years. I think some of the one stat that really sort of jumped out, I think it was last year, or a news story jumped out anyway, was how consumer debt levels are now the highest they've ever been. And I'm not 100% sure I'm around this, but I'm pretty sure that it was the consumer debt levels were now higher than national debt levels. I'm going to float that out there as a potential fact, and the fact that that could be true, I think, is also pretty incredible. But what else we see? Short-term borrowing, payday lenders, the rise of payday lenders over the last several years. The fact that households are spending more on average than they earn each year, and that's year on year on year. It's a big problem, and it's something that a lot of businesses in our space are looking to find ways that they can help. And I think, as a business, obviously we see there's an opportunity for us to help businesses, but I think as well as the obvious commercial aspect of that, there's also certainly within this business, there's a profound feeling that we should be doing more to help in this space, and that businesses that help with payroll and HR should be finding ways to help employers tackle employee wellbeing. So just quickly moving on, we can look at what are described as by the CIPD as the 7 interrelated domains of employee wellbeing. Now, we've touched obviously on financial wellbeing and I guess on health and mental health within that. But there's a lot of things that go into employee wellbeing, and it's not to discount any of those other aspects. It's just to mention that those are probably the two that we picked up on and really felt that there's something we can really contribute to as a business. But all businesses need to consider employee wellbeing from all of these 7 related aspects. So employee wellbeing, what is it? Let's have a look at a definition of employee wellbeing. If you're hopefully you can all see that on your screens there, but sometimes people have screen issues, so I'll read it out as well just to be sure. So this is the definition that we've taken from CIPD, but a little bit of emphasis from us. So what is well-being in the workplace? It's every employer depends on having healthy and productive employees. Valued and supported staff are far more likely to deliver the best outcomes for your business. And if you want to attract and retain committed employees, prioritising the well-being of your staff needs to be at the core of your organisation. I think it's a cry to recognising the position that employee well-being plays in the welfare of a business, I think. And for people who are well versed in HR and payroll, I'm sure none of that comes as a surprise. It maybe what is surprising that it's taken so long for maybe this kind of definition to become more mainstream.
Indeed, yes.
So we were looking at the definition of like this back in July, and we're looking, well, what can we add to the conversation around what wellbeing in the workplace is, and what businesses can do about it. And we really zeroed in on how we can make employees feel valued, and that's really starts to become part of the core of how our business thinks about supporting businesses. So probably one final point, and then I'll probably just move on to the research itself. So I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, but what is the value of employee well-being to businesses? Well, we know that valued staff, valued employees are going to stay longer. They're going to reduce staff turnover. They're more likely to be in work. It's going to reduce sickness absence. They're more productive, and it's going to improve performance. And obviously, from a HR perspective, you have reduced complaints and grievances. And for anyone familiar with what's called the employee value chain, as I understand it, you'll know that happy is a bit pithy, but I do quite like this. Happy employees equals happy customers equals happy profits. And I think it's just the point to note that putting the employee and their well-being at the core of how we run our businesses. It's not just about the employee, it's about the real hard benefits that delivers to the business as well as the employee. It's the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to do, which is great.
I think indeed, was it Richard Branson from Virgin that says if you treat your employees well, they'll treat the customers well. So the default setting is treat your employees well, and they'll take care of the rest.
Which makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And I don't know, Richard Branson's probably a guy I know a thing or two about.
Yeah, I think he's dare suggest he's worth a couple more quid than the both of us put together.
Well, yeah, I suspect, yeah. We wouldn't want to be screwed.
All three of us.
All three of us, quite.
Yes.
That's it. So let's have a look. So why this research now? Let's have a little bit. What I want to do just now is just introduce. So as part of the report, we asked a chap called Stephen Bevan, who is the head of HR and research development at the Institute for Employment Studies, to just have a look at our research and give us some views and some feedback and some context. So, and another first for a webinar, we're going to try and put a clip of a video we took of him discussing it, and we'll see how that goes. Let's roll the tape.
The UK labour market's an interesting position at the moment because we've got some really positive indicators like low unemployment and high employment. So we've got persistently low productivity. We've got stagnant real wage growth. And then we've got the challenges of how you hang on to talent. And that's something that certainly small businesses find a real constraint on their ability to do business, to expand, to be competitive and so on. I think the Engaged Employer report shines a light on some of the perception gaps that there are between the owners and managers of SMEs and the people who work in them. Companies who make effort to get customer loyalty are also the ones who are often the best at getting employee loyalty. And that philosophy perhaps should inform the way that we manage flexibility of rewards and benefits.
Right, I feel like I should say thank you, Stephen, but obviously he's not actually with us to return the compliment. But what do we what is he telling us? I think actually, Hannah, you just move on to the perfect. What he's telling us is that we've never. I think the phrase he uses, we're living in pretty extraordinary times. We've never actually had so many of us in work. The UK employment rate at the moment is 76.1%, which is the highest ratio on record, and at a time when there's more people.
Indeed, a popular call that we get in here to the HR side of the business is all about recruitment. How do we recruit? How do we retain staff? For a lot of professional HR managers, it's probably their number one bugbear. The MD feels that you should be able to select from 50 candidates, but the HR professional knows that's not true. Even at some point, it can be just about being bums on seats. So if you could attract people in, that's fine. If to attract very good people in, that's more difficult. That's where you need to start to be a little bit creative, because the big organisations have got deep pockets. The SME companies, less so. So if you're a little bit more creative with your reward offering, then you can probably attract, retain and motivate your existing staff. I know we've used the two phrases before of attract and retain.
Yeah.
Motivate is a big thing when it comes to benefits. Are the staff going to give that extra yard for you?
This difference between flex and financial benefits.
Or are staff watching the clock, looking for the end of the shift time? And hopefully, if you can be creative in your reward offering, you'll again attract, retain, motivate great staff.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we probably sometimes leave that motivate piece out of the equation, and sometimes I suppose the attract and retain thing have got some numbers behind them where you can look at a churn rate and you can look at your cost to not necessarily cost to acquire, but cost to recruit, and you can see some real hard numbers. But perhaps, like you say, getting bums on seats is one thing, but getting bums on seats
with talent and motivation, that's where you need to be as a business, and accepting anything less than that shouldn't be what about creative HR is all about.
And really great. So, and I think, and that's where you really start to see some of the framing of this challenge, isn't it? Because there's a phrase that comes up time and time again when you talk to employers in this space. It's the war for talent, the recruitment battlefield, that people are really sort of going out to, just the metaphors of a scrap.
It is. There's only so much labour that's out there. So you've got to be sharper and quicker to get to it, or to get to the talented sector of that labour than your competitor. It's effectively no different from any other facet of your business if you want to be the best.
That's cool.
I think most people now who conduct interviews have to be aware that you are in fact selling yourself as a company, as a business that they would want to come and work at, whereas traditionally before, it was very much on the candidate to sell themselves to the employer. So it's a real change and shift onto the employer to actually maximise what's out there to make the SME business more attractive. And happily nowadays, as we know as a business, those products are available.
Yes, to make it a more compelling offer.
Yes, and to be able to compete with the larger businesses in terms of benefits and culture, and you really need to put yourself as a package, as one that some people might prefer to go into a smaller business and be a big fish in a small pond rather than going into a larger organization, work culture, but on a practical level, because after all, especially we all know from a payroll background that people come to work to earn money, to get benefits which affect employees from all ages are widely available to smaller businesses. And the gap isn't as wide as it used to be, which is great news for people looking for talent out there.
That's probably a good thing, I think, because one of the stats that were thrown up whilst we were looking into all this was the fact that there's currently 5 jobs per job seeker across the UK, and in some areas, and this is incredible really, and so in Cambridge and Oxford areas particularly, for example, there is 25 jobs per job seeker, which is an incredible, I mean,
It's a frightening stat from an employer's point of view.
Yeah. I don't know if we have any people who join us today, HR or responsible for recruitment within those areas, but I don't envy that role at all. So so that's just a bit of the wider context. What's happened at the moment, why are we looking at this, and sort of framing the kind of questions that we were looking to put to businesses, large and small, to frame this research. So the research we ran, we commissioned. I think, Hannah, you went through some of the numbers, didn't you, during our introduction?
Yes, I did, in terms of the number of people that we had completing the survey.
Yeah.
There was over 2,000 employees that completed the survey, and also over 350 employers.
Right. So what have we got? 556 employers in total. So lots of opinion nationwide, speaking to employees and employers across the UK. Some commissioned through YouGov, and I think if you're familiar with polls and polling and all that kind of thing, you'll have heard the name YouGov out there, or if you're familiar with research. It was all very strong, all very powerful stuff, but really in-depth set of questions and demographic information to really sort of try and unpick this. And we've got a wealth of information from it. So much so, in fact, that we're going to do a sequence of webinars about this to really tackle some of these key topics in a bit more detail. But without further ado, let's have a look at some of the top findings that we had from the survey. So first of all, what we're calling the value gap. It's been sort of described as a slightly uncomfortable mismatch between how valued employees feel by their employer and how valued employers think their employees feel valued. There's a bit of a tongue twister.
It is employer.
Yeah, but I think so. We talked this about a bit and trying to make that sort of meaningful. And it's to say that if a business has 100 employees, there's probably 12 employees in that business that are an unrecognised flight risk. That if you think you've got 15 employees in that business who don't feel valued, the truer figure is 27.
I think it's important to note that if you've got 15 employees that feel undervalued, not only have you got them as a problem because they're not productive, but what you've also got is the water cooler thing, where they'll chat to the others, it's rubbish here, it's terrible, it's long hours, it's low pay, and all of a sudden you've got this drip, 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 drip effect. So 15 employees will quickly turn to 20, will turn to 25. So again, you think, well, 15, that's not incredibly bad so there must be lots that are happy.
Yeah.
But be careful, from a culture perspective, it can get quite damaging quite quickly.
So yeah, I guess so. The chat at the water cooler will start to poison the well.
Oh, I like your style.
I've come up with that on the spot.
Segue.
Okay, I mean, so I think, yeah, so we can see that there's two sides to that, isn't there? One is that there is an unrecognised flight risk, and there's the potential for that flight risk to escalate because it's not being, and perhaps the scale of it is not being recognised. And I think that probably refers back to the retention challenge as much as anything else. If we look at, and I think there's a further side to this is you have this perception gap generally across SMEs, but then you've also got a real difference across sectors and across regions. And just to look at the sectors here, I just wanted to pull in these are the top 10 sectors that we've got by how how many employees feel unvalued. So what we're looking at here is, at the top there, we're seeing in the retail industry, 44% of employees don't feel valued by their employer. Same again for transportation and distribution. And as we go down, you can see hospitality and leisure, 36%. So I mean, I think this, what it says to me, I don't know, is that some, I mean, obviously, some industries have difficulties around this.
Indeed, yes, indeed.
Is that, and I suppose I'll put this one to the panel. Christina, what do you think? What is you'll have seen businesses from every sector. Do you recognise greater churn and challenges on payroll in certain industries rather than others?
Well, certainly, as far as retail, it doesn't come as a surprise, because you have a lot of people that work within that industry that are using that as a second job, if you like, or to while they're in education, etc. But retail, as we all know, is under severe pressure with online services, etc. So if you think of the challenges that they're facing and the huge damage that 40% will impact on them, I think it's really important that they do start to take more care on making themselves attractive to their staff. Most definitely.
I think as well that if you have a look at retail, transport and distribution, etc., they're all on or around national minimum wage jobs, where it's a case of you are working for probably the lowest paid employer in the country. So that's why we get a lot of dissatisfaction. I know I'm not going to steal any thunder, Stuart, but I know we've got some ideas and thoughts in the report about how that can add value to your business. So today we're not talking essentially about the pay rate or the salary, but it's adding value. So and these, they're not necessarily expensive things to do as well. Some are, but I'll more of that when Stuart gets to it.
Yeah, most definitely. And sometimes you can invest in ideas that will actually save you the business money too, and make your staff happier. And a lot of for example, medical and health services, hospitality, leisure, you will find people that it's a passion of theirs. They may be dissatisfied in a number of areas, certainly pay, I would think, but they're in that industry for a reason, and often enjoy parts of their job, and really it's just to be imaginative in helping them to enjoy other parts of their job, or looking at what is driving people these days with more of an aging workforce, more the focus on childcare and spreading the load of childcare, and really making sure that people are educated to know what is out there, like shared parental leave. We've got a very low take up of that. So yeah, lots of ideas that are out there.
Yeah, definitely. So let's have a look at. I think some of those ideas are going to pop up, I think, in another section. So let's have a look at the next top line from the report. So the benefits barometer. What we can see is 34% of employees of SMEs say they are not offered any benefits, compared with 22% of larger businesses. So 34% of employees who say they aren't offered any benefits versus 22% of larger businesses. So one of the things that came out strongly was just how there is a clear, it is competitive, and it is a challenge when SMEs and larger businesses are competing for the same talent. And I think there's two sides that seem to come out. One is that, as you alluded to earlier, Christina, the opportunity is there now for SMEs to close that gap. That there are software and there is packages available that make that employee offer.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, much easier to deliver. And I think the second thing that came out is that the opportunity is there to not only compete against larger businesses, but you can, as a smaller firm, it can really take a lead in attracting among and against your SME competitors, your smaller business competitors in that space. In the full report itself, plug coming up here, in the full report itself, we've got a few case studies on businesses in that space. Sipsmith's Gin Distillery, which looks fabulous. They've got some real observations on that, and I'd encourage people to read that, or at least watch our video overview, which tells you a little bit more about them. But so that's the second one. I don't want to dwell too much on this one, because I think in some ways it's I don't think that's groundbreaking discovery. I think it was more the scale and extent, and there's a lot more behind that within the full report itself. But I don't want to dwell too much there. What I did want to look at next is the difference between some of these benefits. And when we talk about benefits, we're talking about financial and flexible, all manner of benefits, but just fundamentally anything beyond your basic pay. What the percentage of firms that are supplying different benefits, and the difference between those percentages. So you can see over half of larger firms are providing discounts on leisure and shopping, compared with just 9% of SMEs. You can see 40% of larger firms are offering holiday buy, sell and trade schemes.
Can I just wade in there with my employment law hat on? Holiday buying and selling schemes are great and wonderful, and they're probably even cost neutral if you've got a good spread of people buying and selling. However, employment law hat here talking again, it's vital that they do not go below 28 days holiday per annum. That can be 20 days plus the 8 stats.
Right, okay.
But if you duck below 28, then you're no longer legal, you're acting illegally. So they can sell as many holidays as they want, but 28 is the absolute backstop, including bank holidays, that they have to have per annum. Needless to say, that's for full-time staff, but part-time staff pro rata.
Right. So someone's thinking of bringing in that kind of scheme. They should bear in mind some kind of.
There needs to be a strong HR control that somebody doesn't sell too many and has 27 days holiday per annum. Not only are you acting outside of the law, you then bringing yourself up to claims, not only working time regulation claims, but claims of constructive dismissal. My employer is making me work illegally. So please, these are the statutory absolute minimums.
Right.
28 days.
To be aware of something like that. Is there a payroll aspect to those as well? I imagine if you.
In as much, well, I actually think holiday buying and selling is a great scheme. It's effectively the employee is choosing, to whether or not he can actually sacrifice his own salary or to
right.
or to buy more, but it isn't. But obviously, there are products there within payroll which stops any employer from making sure that they don't sacrifice too much of their holiday with various checks throughout the payroll. So yeah, but from a payroll point of view, it's just the same thing. You can't go below a minimum wage, but that doesn't really come into it with holiday buy and sell. I actually think it's a great way for employees who get irritated because sometimes they're coming towards the end of the holiday year and haven't been able to use up all of their holiday. And I would think most companies have a rule where they can only take over 5 days. It's quite easy to monitor, and being able to sell 1 or 2 days is better than losing it altogether. Keeps your employee happy.
Yeah, it would definitely feel a bit unfair, I think.
Yeah.
completely subjective perception, but yeah.
And nothing is nicer. So, for example, someone who's maybe planning a wedding the following year and think that, you know, they need an awful lot of time off. It's great to be able to instead of having to negotiate with your boss when, you know, everyone's under pressure for deadlines, to have that ability to be able to buy your own holiday. I think that that gives you that flexibility. It's all about flexibility with staff.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's an opportunity to add a lot of value to someone at a pretty important moment.
Yeah. And it's
so obviously we've discussed the.
I mean, I wouldn't think that these come at a huge expense. These top three, the discounts on leisure and shopping, employee assistance programs, they are very cheap products out there for SMBs to do that, to offer that. And obviously, holiday buy and sell. This is, you're just dealing with the employee is just choosing how to spend their money.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think. I don't know, there's clearly a lot to take away from that, and I should say we'll share these slides around everything after the webinar is finished. Yeah, and we'll say you can pour over in a bit more detail. I'm conscious of I don't want to dwell too long, so we'll push on next. So key point 3, London leading the way. So it probably comes as no real great surprise to learn that. That businesses in London are ahead of the rest of the UK when it comes to their benefit offer. So 90% of businesses in London of all sizes offer benefits to their employees. That's a really strong comparison. But I think to my hometown, Grimsby, I think it's only 29. 71, got the wrong way around. 71% of businesses are offering their employees benefits. So 90% in London, 71% in Grimsby. Clearly a big difference there. I think there's within the report itself, there's a lot more depth behind that. But I think one of the things that I just wanted to compare with, and you'll see on the map on the side there, is the percentage of employees who don't feel valued by region. And I think it's quite striking, just as an observation, to see that although London is leading the way in terms of benefits offers, it actually, and I go back to my Grimsby assessment, it has the same level of dissatisfaction or undervalue among employees for employees in London and Yorkshire and Humber, despite that difference. So I think one of the things that's clear is that there's a complex picture to it, and I think part of that is to do with the ferocity of the labour market, and I think we go back to the number of jobs per
part-time staff who don't work Friday.
Big difference between London and Yorkshire and Humber, and perhaps the ferocity,
the special
maturity of perhaps.
The north-south divide is it's not a new thing. It's been around for many years, and that's an excellent example on screen right there. I can say this as a fellow Yorkshireman. The glory days of industry in Yorkshire are long gone, and again we're coming back to kind of pockets of Yorkshire where there's very high unemployment. Needless to say, down in London, take your pick. We deal a lot with a lot of restaurants in London, and they have staff that literally, we see a lot of disciplinaries for low-level stuff because staff are Thursday, walk out and I'll get a job down the road. So I can see why in London they're having to go the extra mile just to actually keep staff and keep them happy.
Because the market's so competitive, there is a need to.
And the expense of recruitment is horrendous. Recruitment fees, you've got the interviewing expenses, you've got the induction expenses, you've got the initial training expenses. When they first start, they'll be reasonably unproductive, but you're still paying them full pay. So hanging on to staff is the short way to a successful business.
Right, which is why they're just going as far as they can. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. As I say, there's much more information in the full report, but is that makes paints a bit of a picture for our viewers, listeners. What's the collective verb? Attendees. Let's move on to the final point, and then we'll move on to the Q&As, I think, because I'm conscious of time. Last one just being that this difference between flex and financial benefits. I think one of the things that was clear is that financial benefits are very valued, but at the same time, 87% of employers say employees are looking for more than just pay, and that the pay is expected and needs to be competitive. The right saying that, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, yes, yeah. Absolutely.
And that and getting pay right is an absolute moment of truth, isn't it, Christiana? We know all about that.
Absolutely, accurately, on time, and all their data kept securely. And not just that now, it's you have to think about the employee experience. You know, as a payroll provider, we cannot just think about the client who's employing us. We have to think about their employees and their whole experience of viewing their pay slips, understanding their pay, making sure that all their documents are received quickly. We all know that there's programs out there telling people to, like Martin Lewis, change your bank account. You need to be able to do that quickly, to be able to view it on mobiles, etc., etc. So it's all about, not payroll has always been there to complement HR with sort of keeping employees happy, and never more important than nowadays. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So I mean, I think that's kind of pretty much given an accepted fact now. Looking at the balance of what employees think is most important in terms of a benefit on offer. So, I mean, we can see at the top two are both financial, but I think one of the key things for us was just recognizing that more than just pay is key. It's what are the other benefits or options that employers can put into that.
Yeah, I'm looking at the third one down there, which is the remote working. I don't want to give too much of a Yorkshire slant on today, Stuart, I apologise, but the Yorkshireman in me, that can be actually cheaper for your business. But of course, there's a green issue of staff not having to get in the cars and pollute the atmosphere to get to work, but also while they're at home, they're using their electricity, their gas, their heating, and their fuel saving in the car as well. So working from home, it's always an easy win because it doesn't cost anything. But from a HR perspective, make sure that, and I'm now doing the air commas, working from home is actually working from home and not having the laptop on, but doing the dishwasher and making the beds. It's key that you monitor them, that their productivity does not drop off on the days they work from home. Some industries it's irrelevant, like nursing and childcare, you can't work from home, but office-based, it's, as you can see, it's the third most popular one, and it's easy and reasonably cheap to implement if you police it correctly.
Yeah, I would also add to the I think most people are looking for flexibility in that if they're in an office, 9 to 5:30 role, that they have the flexibility of working from home if required, say 1 or 2 days a week, or ad hoc when required, rather than the rigid, you must be on a team, working away in front of your supervisor. Those days are long gone. So remote working has obviously its benefits, but also business needs to think about how they train and develop their staff, as well as obviously manage them, make sure they are working. But when you bring new people on board, remote workers can suffer from not developing as fast as and being as effective as if you're there amongst a team of people.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think maybe segues a little bit into a further stat. When we looked into some of these benefits, interestingly picked this one out actually. We looked into the gender divide between what women and men felt were the most important benefits, and this was cited by 35% of female employees as the most important versus 26% of male employees. And I think there's clearly that element of flexible and remote working and balancing family life and coming back from maternity leave. And
yes, and I think when we looked at the age splits as well, it was something that was more popular with people that were in their 20s and 30s than it was people that were slightly older than that as well.
Okay. Which, yeah, I suppose would kind of bear that out, wouldn't it? Right, I think, so, I mean, that's what we're seeing. I was going to recap, but I'm conscious of time, and I think it would be really good to look at some questions now, I think, and see how we can try and answer a few that might have come up during the during
right, so I will have a quick look for any questions that we've received. So the first question is from Paul, and Paul has said, my MD wants to implement a buy and sell annual leave scheme. So are there any key considerations that I must make from a payroll and HR perspective? So obviously we've discussed the fact that the holidays mustn't dip below 28 days.
Yep. Also working from home, you still legally need to monitor their working time. So they effectively, if they could record their start dates and finish date every day. And I'm not going to go into it here because we've got some excellent health and safety people that work for us here at Moorepay. Yeah, health and safety, is their working environment suitable? That needs to be looked at as well. And again, as you said, Stuart, policing, make sure that they actually are giving you the output that you need.
Brilliant, thank you. We've also had a question from Alison. Alison has said that looking at the benefits, one of the things that her business is looking at is giving sales teams Fridays off if they hit their sales targets. Now, how does that work with part-time staff who don't work Fridays?
I guess that's a question for me, yes. There's special legislation out there that means that if you treat a part-time person less favourably than their full-time equivalent, then you are breaking the law. So in this circumstance, what you do is, I don't know, supposing they work Monday to Thursday, then you'd let them work Monday to Wednesday and let them have kind of Thursday afternoon off. So the ratio is the same of full-time, part-time. Make sure it's all pro rata and you'll be fine.
We have had a number of questions through actually in relation to the buying and selling of holidays. There's been questions around the fact that while it is the 28-day legal minimum at the moment, will this change after Brexit? And people also asking around from a payroll perspective, how does that actually work? Because obviously people are having reductions in their earnings through potentially buying, for example, if they buy 5 extra day holiday, then how does that work? Does that come out on a monthly basis, or does that just come out at one point in the year?
That really depends on however the employer wants to frame that. So they could say you take out your holiday as, deduct it as it's taken, or just increase your salary or decrease your salary at the beginning of the year, and have a reduction on that salary at one point. So it really is a case of just speaking to your payroll providers to how you want to process that. It's not particularly difficult. All I would say is that if it's all at one point, they may have fluctuations with tax and NI at the beginning of the year, which is like a significant time, isn't it? January. So no, there isn't any kind of consideration there. The one thing you may like to think about is the 13.8% that you're going to be saving on employers' national insurance. So when they're buying holiday. Okay,
I thought we were going to get through a webinar without mentioning the B word. It's the Brexit. We failed for every single webinar in the last 3.5 years. We've mentioned it. Brexit until the 28 days minimum after Brexit was the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will that still be the case?
The short answer is yes. The 28 will, I would imagine, still be solid after Brexit. The European directive says it's 20 days, but I'm it was Tony Blair actually who increased that to 28. So it's UK legislation making it 28 rather than European legislation making it 28. So I think we'll be safe.
Thank you, Carl. Right, what I will now do is I will now come towards the end of the webinar. Thank you for everyone that asked a question. If you do think of any other questions, then feel free to email them through afterwards and we'll certainly be able to help you. And in terms of additional resources that you can access through Moorepay, on a monthly basis, we do publish an employment law and HR legislation guide, which is located in the resources section of our website. And if you follow us on any of our social sites, we publish all of our new blogs and guides on there, so you'll see them flash up. And like I said, we will be sending you a copy of the webinar and also recording via email, and we'll also include a link to the report in there, so that if you want to find out more and read some of the detail on the findings, then you can do so there. So really, it just leaves me to say thank you to Stuart, Carl and Christina for their time this afternoon, and thank you to yourselves for joining the webinar. I hope you have a brilliant weekend, and we will be in touch with the slides and recording. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.